Checkmate. That word shouldn't have belonged to a man with dirt on his hands and a hole in his coat. But it did. And in that moment, time cracked open. Under the roaring Oshodi Bridge, Lagos suddenly forgot how to breathe. Drivers paused mid-honk. Hawkers froze, water bottles sweating in their hands. The traffic held its pulse. All for a wooden chessboard and a man who looked like he hadn't bathed in weeks. His name was Jonathan. He sat on a crooked bench in a tattered coat 2 sizes too big, the collar frayed like old regret. His beard was thick and wild, his eyes half shut from years of staring at nothing. But they opened fully now, locked onto the man across from him. Williams, the billionaire, the man who had built Lambstech from a garage dream into an empire of blinking servers and glowing bank accounts. Williams, who wore navy like it was skin, whose black Bentley still idled nearby, purring like money. He stared at the board in disbelief, his hands motionless beside crystal cufflinks. His queen? Trapped. His rook? Caged. His king? Cornered like a rat. He had lost. To a nobody. And the street knew it. He won. Someone screamed, cracking the silence. Another voice echoed. The homeless man beat the billionaire. A child shrieked with laughter. The crowd erupted like thunder finding sky. A woman clapped both hands over her mouth, eyes wide. 2 mechanics yelled, spinning in circles. A conductor started dancing. Even the danfos honked, not in protest, but celebration. But Williams didn't move. His brain was still trapped in that square of 64 boxes, trying to make sense of the impossibility. He looked at Jonathan again, those calm eyes, that strange smile. There was no gloating, just peace. Williams stood slowly. The move had been fair. The game had been real, and he had made a promise. If you win, he had said earlier with a laugh, take my company. People thought it was a joke. He had said it so many times before, half in play, always in confidence. But this wasn't one of those times. This time, Jonathan had nodded. Quietly, seriously. And if you lose, the man had said with a whisper like wind, will you keep your word? Williams had chuckled then, not knowing his future was already halfway gone. Now the crowd leaned in, waiting to see what a billionaire does when he loses to a ghost in dirty shoes. Williams took a breath that sounded like surrender and extended his hand. Congratulations, he said hoarsely. You're the new CEO of Lambstech. The noise that followed could have shattered Oshodi Bridge. But Jonathan didn't bask in it. He simply rose, took the offered hand, and shook it. His grip was warm and firm, like someone who had learned to hold on when life tried to drag him under. A few phones rose to snap photos. Some mouths gaped. The world had tilted. Rich had bowed to ragged. Power had passed across splinters of wood and logic. Then Williams pointed toward his Bentley. Come, he said. Get in. People parted as the 2 men walked through the crowd. Some clapped. Some whispered blessings. A few just watched, silent, as if history were passing by them. Jonathan turned back for a moment. Thank you, he told the crowd. Bear witness. Remember what you saw. And then he slipped into the back seat of a car that smelled like polished leather and the kind of wealth that doesn't apologize. Inside, he sat like he didn't belong, but he didn't shrink. The chessboard rested gently on his knees. Across from him, Williams studied him with something halfway between shock and awe. Silence lived in the car. Outside, Lego screamed. Inside, the world waited. Who are you? Williams finally asked. Jonathan looked down at his own hands. Calloused. Scarred. Steady. My name is Jonathan, he said. And before I fell, I was... The car's dashboard lit up, interrupting him. A call. The screen read, boardroom. Then a second line appeared. Another call. Unknown number. 2 calls. 1 promise. A moment that split futures. Jonathan looked up, eyes calm. Answer it, he said softly. It's time to keep your word. It hadn't started with a bet. Not really. It started with a morning too bright to ignore. With Laro's sunshine sliding across the sky like fresh hope. With Williams waking up restless in a mansion that felt too big for the silence it held. He'd been tired, not of money, not of power, but of the noise in his own head. Board meetings, legal fires, staff conflicts, a million decisions, none of them ever quiet. So he did what he always did when the noise got too loud. He played chess. It was his way of breathing again. The board was honest. The pieces told the truth. And when he wanted to feel human again, he went where other rich men didn't. He drove under bridges. He parked beside forgotten streets. He brought food, talked, smiled, and always, he brought his board. That morning, it was Oshity. Boys ran toward the Bentley as it pulled up. Women whispered. One man whistled low. Williams stepped out, holding the board like a sacred thing. He scanned the crowd. Most people stared, unsure whether to wave or back away. Then he saw the man, a figure sitting still, coat dirty, hair like a thundercloud. He didn't look up when the Bentley door shut. He didn't beg. He didn't blink. He just breathed slow, as if time didn't touch him. Williams walked over. "Good morning," he said. "Do you play chess?" The man finally looked up. His eyes were tired. "Not weak, just done." "Sometimes," he said. Williams smiled. "Let's make it interesting." He said like he always did, with the confidence of a man who had never lost. "If you win," he said playfully, "take my company." Everything stopped. A woman dropped her water bag. A hawker gaped. A child said, Jonathan, that was his name, tilted his head slightly. "And if you lose?" he asked. Williams grinned. "I won't." Jonathan's smile was small, but dangerous. "Let the street witness," he said loudly. And the street came. From the first move, it felt different. Williams attacked. His bishop flew out early. His knight danced sharp. He built a net. Jonathan didn't fight. He flowed, moved like water, stepped back when needed, closed doors softly, answer not with power, but with patience. And piece by piece, he built a trap. Williams started to sweat. A pawn rose like a ghost. A knight curved like karma. A bishop, he hadn't seen that bishop, waited like regret. And then the king moved. "Checkmate," Jonathan said. The Bentley moved like a ghost through Lagos traffic, cutting across the chaos with the arrogance only wealth could afford. Inside, though, nothing felt settled. Nothing felt still. Jonathan sat in silence, the chessboard resting on his knees like it had followed him through time. The smell of leather, cologne, and newness wrapped around him, but it didn't touch him. Not really. He sat like a man floating above his own life. Across from him, Williams was staring. Not at his phone, not at the board, at him. "I don't understand," he said finally. "Who are you?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. He just looked at his hands. Calloused, dirty, still trembling, but steady in a way Williams couldn't explain. "Just a man," he said softly, "who made one too many wrong turns." Williams studied him. The coat, the worn shoes, the eyes that looked too old for his face. "You're more than that," he said. "You see the board in layers. You don't just play the game. You breathe it." Jonathan's lips tugged slightly, not into a smile exactly, but something close to remembering what that used to feel like. "I used to be known," he said, voice low, "for winning." Williams leaned back, absorbing that. He didn't push. He just nodded. Then he reached for the car's intercom. "We're making a stop," he said. "Barber shop on Surelier Avenue." The driver didn't ask questions. The shop was small, cracked tile floors, and a single rotating fan. When Williams stepped in, the barber nearly dropped his clippers. "Ah, Chief Williams." "Good afternoon, sir." But Williams waved him off. "Not for me today. He's the one." The barber turned to see Jonathan and blinked. It took him a moment to realize this wasn't a man off the street looking for a free shave. Not today. Jonathan sat. The scissors began. Hair fell. The beard vanished. With every pass of the blade, the man from under the bridge disappeared, piece by piece. The skin underneath was lighter, untouched by sun and soot. The eyes that emerged were alert, quiet, thinking. When the barber finished and spun the chair, Jonathan blinked at the mirror. He looked clean. That was the strangest part. Clean and unfamiliar. Williams stood behind him. "Now," he said with a nod, "you look like someone the world would listen to." Jonathan didn't respond, but his throat tightened. Their next stop was a boutique in Victoria Island. The kind of place with glass doors that hissed open and air conditioning that smelled like confidence. "I need a suit," Williams told the attendant. "Black. Executive. Perfect." She looked at Jonathan with wide eyes, confused but professional. Minutes later, he stood before the mirror in a tailored suit that held his shoulders like they belonged to a man with weight in the world. He stared at himself. Not the street man. Not the chess hustler. Someone else. Someone he hadn't seen in a very long time. Back in the Bentley, the world looked different. The people outside didn't glance at him with pity now. They didn't glance at all. They saw the car and assumed wealth, position, safety. But inside, Jonathan's heart hadn't changed clothes. It still wore holes and bruises. The only thing that felt real was the board on his lap. The car turned off the main road. The gates of Banana Island opened slowly, and Jonathan held his breath. The mansion was bigger than some banks. White marble steps, fountains that didn't stop, trees that had never known dust. Jonathan stepped out carefully, as if afraid he might leave footprints that betrayed him. Inside, everything was polished. The kind of home where even silence had been designed. Williams led him to a private study. Bookshelves, whiskey, a Harvard certificate, photos with governors. The desk was heavy and old. Real wood, not veneer. This wasn't decoration. It was legacy. Williams poured 2 drinks, but Jonathan didn't touch his. Now, Williams said, "Talk to me." "Who are you?" Jonathan stared at the chessboard again. "My name," he said quietly, "is Jonathan Adme." Williams blinked. "Adme? As in?" Jonathan nodded. "National champion. 6 years in a row. I played for Nigeria. I played in Sydney, in New York, in Moscow. I was someone once." Williams leaned forward, stunned. Jonathan continued. "I had a wife. Amanda. Beautiful. Smart. She convinced me to invest in a startup her friend was launching. I trusted her. I believed her." His voice dropped. "But it wasn't a startup. It was a setup." Williams frowned. "She planted drugs in our home. In the safe. I didn't know. I didn't suspect. Until the police came. Until she testified against me in court." Silence. "I spent 5 years in prison," he said. Williams said nothing. "I lost everything. My career, my name, my home. And when I came out, she had already married another man. A billionaire investor." He exhaled. "No one called me champion anymore. I was just the ex-con who once held a trophy." Williams finally spoke, voice tight. "Jesus." Jonathan smiled bitterly. "Yeah, him too." A long pause settled between them. Then Williams stood. "You won," he said. "You beat me fair. And I made a promise. In front of witnesses." Jonathan looked up. "You're offering me the company?" "I'm offering you more," Williams said. 30% of Lamb's Tech. Not as a gift. As a partner." Jonathan stared. 30%? Worth about $800 million. Silence. Then Jonathan stood, his knees shaking. "I can't," he whispered. "I didn't earn this." "You did," Williams said. "You earned it when you reminded me why I built this company. To build. To believe. To give chances." He extended his hand again. This time, Jonathan took it and didn't let go. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Not for either of them. Jonathan lay awake in the guest suite, staring at the ceiling fan. He had a bed again. A real bed. Sheets that didn't smell like strangers. A room with a door. But the past doesn't knock before walking in. It walked in early the next morning. At the mansion's gate stood a woman. Her blouse wrinkled. Hair tangled. Eyes swollen from nights she couldn't sleep through. Her name was Amanda. She clutched her handbag like it was the last piece of her. "I need to see him," she told the guard. "Tell him Amanda is here." The guard looked at her like she might break if he exhaled too hard. And then he walked toward the house. Inside, Jonathan was reviewing company documents, still getting used to the title on his emails. When the guard said her name, he didn't move at first. He just whispered it. "Amanda?" Williams glanced up. "Your wife." "Ex-wife," Jonathan replied. "Or at least she was." Williams stood. "Want me to turn her away?" Jonathan shook his head. "No, I need to see her." Amanda entered the study like a shadow returning to its source. She froze when she saw him. Clean, upright, alive. "Jonathan," she whispered. He didn't respond. Didn't blink. Williams gave him space. "Alone." Amanda took a trembling step forward. "I didn't know you were alive. I thought. You thought I died under the bridge," he said softly. "No, I was scared. After the arrest, the press, the police. Samuel promised. He said he'd protect me. You planted the drugs." She fell to her knees. "Please." I have nothing left. Samuel died in a crash. The banks took everything. I'm sleeping in churches now. You're all I have. Jonathan looked down at her like he was staring at a ghost that had finally run out of power. You'll stay, he said, but not as a guest. Her eyes widened. You'll work as a janitor. Clean the floors you once walked on in heels. Jonathan, it's the only way I can forgive you. She nodded, shaking, and followed the housekeeper without another word. Later that night, Jonathan sat in the garden, staring into the trees. Williams joined him, silent for a while. She's here, Williams said finally. You're past. Jonathan nodded. And now she sweeps the hall I sleep in. Is that justice? Williams asked. Jonathan sighed. It's not revenge. It's not justice. It's just the truth. Williams said nothing. And in the dark, the fountain kept flowing. The share registry. 30% to Jonathan Adme. That should have been hers. But Amanda's story wasn't finished. One night, she returned to the study after midnight. The lights were low, the air still. She stared at the desk, at the folder, the share registry. 30% to Jonathan Adme. That should have been hers. She lifted her phone. Snap, snap. And then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Do you want her life back? She stared. Who is this? Someone who can help you undo a mistake. Meet me tomorrow. 6 p.m., back gate. Come alone. Her fingers trembled. But what she didn't know was that the red light in the study's corner had just blinked, and the camera had seen everything. Some storms don't come with thunder. Some arrive as whispers. At exactly 8:03 a.m., Lamstecka's glass lobby held its usual rhythm. Coffee, chatter, card swipes, elevator dings, until 3 men in navy suits walked through the front door with too much calm. That kind of calm only comes with a warrant in one hand and a ruined future in the other. Jonathan was already in the boardroom when a message came. Sir, the receptionist whispered over the internal comm. There are men from the Financial Crime Commission here. They say it's urgent. They asked for you and Mr. Williams by name. He didn't blink, didn't even flinch, but inside something twisted. A familiar old cold, the kind that lived under concrete bridges and prison ceilings. They met them in the lobby. Williams walked in 2 steps behind Jonathan, his phone still in hand from a call he'd dropped mid-sentence. 3 officers stood waiting. 2 men, 1 woman, all in plain suits, badges tucked neatly in breast pockets, as if to remind everyone they weren't here to negotiate. Mr. Adme, the taller man began. Mr. Williams, we are here under formal directive. The woman opened a folder and read. We have received a petition indicating that 30% of Lamstec was transferred under unlawful circumstances, namely coercion and verbal wagering, unsupported by due process. The word coercion hit like spit in the face. The rest of the lobby kept moving, but slower now, like the city had suddenly grown ears. Williams stepped forward. Who filed this petition? The officer paused. It was submitted anonymously, but the legal counsel attached is Kalu and Partners. Jonathan turned sharply. Kalu, the CFO. He emerged from the hallway like a shadow that had been waiting for its cue. No fear, no guilt, just that same calm. Everything we do here is for the protection of the company, sir, he said to Williams with a rehearsed tone. We cannot let confusion harm the shareholders. Williams's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. The officer continued. We also received a separate tip. Drugs were found in the staff quarters of your estate, Mr. Adme. We have a warrant to search both your residence and this premises. Effective immediately. Jonathan's throat went dry. He remembered. The study, the file, the blinking red light in the corner. Amanda. Jessica rushed down from the executive floor, heels silent on the tile. Her eyes flicked across every face, instantly grasping the storm. What's the risk? She whispered to Williams. Port Harcourt, he said. We're mid-signature. If this hits before the board signs, the deal dies. So do 3,000 jobs. Jessica looked at Jonathan. He looked at her. No words were needed. She pressed a folder into his hand. The contracts are upstairs. You have 10 minutes. The elevator dinged. He ran. 10 floors up, the boardroom doors were open. A dozen executives seated, pens ready. On the table, the Port Harcourt contract. A deal that had taken 8 months of blood, flight delays, and legal fencing. Jonathan entered breathless. He opened the folder, and then he saw her. Amanda, standing at the far end of the room, not in her apron, not in uniform, in a pale blue dress, her eyes red, and beside her, Kalu, briefcase in hand. He stepped forward and pulled out a second folder. A bold red seal on the cover. Court injunction, he said smoothly. Effective immediately. No transactions, no board signatures. Any further action will be considered contempt. Jonathan froze. His name was already inked on the contract's lower margin, one line away from making it binding. 2 men from the FCC stepped into the boardroom. Mr. Adme, one of them said, "Please come with us." He sat alone in the interrogation room. A metal table, a flickering fluorescent bulb, 2 chairs, no window. Not the first time. He knew this silence, knew how it waited for cracks. But Jonathan didn't crack. He folded his hands and stared forward like he was still staring at a chessboard. The 2 officers re-entered with a file. "You understand the nature of these allegations?" one asked. Jonathan nodded once. "I do. Do you have legal counsel?" He didn't answer. He didn't need a lawyer. He needed the truth to land faster than the lie. And just then, the door opened again. Williams entered first, face set in stone. Jessica followed. Her hair was messier than usual. No heels, just fire in her eyes. "Gentlemen," she said, placing a thick folder on the table with a satisfying thud. "You've detained the wrong man." The lead officer didn't flinch. "That's what they all say." Jessica flipped open the file. "Let me walk you through something." Photo after photo. Grainy but clear. Amanda, standing in the study at 12:46 a.m. Amanda, snapping photos of confidential documents. Amanda, receiving a call and slipping something beneath the desk. Amanda, at the back gate, meeting Kalu, passing him an envelope. Jessica folded her arms. That envelope contained a forged affidavit stating Jonathan coerced Williams into transferring 30% ownership. It was meant to be anonymously submitted with just enough delay for the scandal to destabilize the stock. The officer leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. Jessica wasn't done. "We also recovered this." She placed a small recording device on the table. Found in Amanda's cleaning cart. Hidden. She forgot to wipe the memory card. She pressed play. Kalu's voice came through, calm, methodical. "Once FCC shows up, Williams will panic. The media will eat the story alive. The board will cave. We'll buy back the shares at half their value through a shell account. Amanda, don't get cold feet now. You'll get your cut." Amanda's voice followed, shaking. "He's a good man. He doesn't deserve this." "Deserve?" Kalu hissed. "He took what should have been yours. Now take it back." The room went silent. The officers looked at each other, then back at Jonathan. He didn't smile, didn't blink. He just sat, the same way he had under the bridge, waiting for the world to catch up to the truth. They released him before sunset. Outside, the city glowed gold across the lagoon. Lagos looked like it was holding its breath. Jessica walked beside him. "You okay?" "No," he said honestly. "Good," she replied. "You're not supposed to be." He chuckled. It felt like the first real sound he'd made in days. Then he looked at her, really looked, and said, "Thank you." She met his eyes. "You're not alone anymore." The next morning, Amanda sat in the mansion's courtyard, wearing civilian clothes, hands shaking. The guard stood around her. Calm, firm. She knew what was coming. Jonathan approached. She couldn't look at him. "I never meant for it to go that far," she whispered. "Kalu said it was just a legal technicality." You thought the same thing 5 years ago," Jonathan said quietly. "You didn't know. You were forced. You were scared. That's always your line." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I was jealous," she said, "seeing you win again. I thought it should have been me. I thought if I ruined it, I'd feel better. But I don't." He nodded slowly. "I forgave you long before you asked," he said. "But I gave you a second chance, and you broke it again." She sobbed now. "Please don't send me to prison. I'll leave. I'll disappear. Just please." He looked at her. Really looked. Then he turned to the guards. "Take her to the authorities. Make sure she's treated fairly." As they led her away, Amanda broke. And Jonathan stood still. No anger. Just the ache of closing a chapter. Back in the garden, Williams found him an hour later. "You could have protected her," he said quietly. "No one would have questioned you." "If I had," Jonathan replied, "I'd be her. I'd confuse forgiveness with forgetting. I'd let the cycle restart." He looked at the sky. "It's not about punishment. It's about ending the story the right way." Williams smiled faintly. "You've become wiser than half the board combined." Jonathan shrugged. "Life's the best university. No scholarships, though." The next board meeting was different. Call's chair sat empty. Jonathan's wasn't. He walked in as a full partner. No whispering now, just nods. Recognition. Jessica sat to his left. When Williams gave his opening remarks, he looked right at Jonathan. "Some storms don't destroy us," he said. "They wash away what didn't belong." Then he added, "And sometimes they bring us new captains." The applause didn't come all at once. But when it did, it felt earned. And Jonathan, once a man with nothing, sat at the table not as a guest, but as someone who had beaten the game no one saw coming. The next 2 weeks remade Jonathan. He woke before the sun, shaved, ironed his shirts, polished his shoes. He still couldn't sleep more than 5 hours. Prison and street life had wired him for vigilance. But now he rose with purpose. He wasn't hiding under bridges anymore. He was walking into boardrooms. Each morning, Jessica handed him a coffee, always black, always hot. They didn't talk about the mess with Amanda or the investigation that loomed over his head like a storm cloud. But her presence was solid. Her eyes said, "I'm here if you fall again." Inside Lambstech, the mood had shifted. People whispered less and listened more. The viral chess video had done its rounds. A few called it luck. Most saw something else: poise, strategy, vision. And now, they watched him not as a former homeless man, but as a partner. In the 10th floor boardroom, under soft lights and Lego skyline, Jonathan began to speak. Not with polish, but with clarity. He didn't use big words. He used true ones. "Our engineers are wasting 3 hours a day fixing problems we already know about," he said one morning, pointing to the operations map. "That's not innovation. That's inertia." Jessica leaned back, arms folded, eyes bright. She had built her reputation on cutting through corporate fog, and now someone else was clearing air alongside her. Outside the glass, Legos pulsed with life. Traffic, noise, the thrum of ambition. Inside, Jonathan reshaped silence into strategy. People listened. But back in the mansion, shadows moved. Amanda swept the halls like a ghost. Her hands, once adorned with rings, were raw from cleaning fluid. Her pride had cracked, layer by layer, as she mopped the marble floors of the man she'd betrayed. At night, when no one watched, she crept into the study. She stared at documents, share percentages, partnership clauses, meeting notes with Jessica's name scrawled beside Jonathan's. She took photos, one by one, quietly. Her fingers trembled over a single line. "Jonathan Adme, 30% ownership." That number haunted her. It should have been hers. A message blinked on her phone from an unknown number. "Do you want it back?" Her reply was silence. Then, yes. The next morning, the storm broke. Jonathan had just wrapped a field session with the engineering team. Boots on the ground, real feedback, real numbers. He was scribbling thoughts into his notebook when the receptionist called him to the lobby. 3 officials from the Financial Crime Commission stood waiting. "We have a petition," the lead officer said, calm but firm, "alleging illegal acquisition of shares and renewed involvement with restricted substances." It hit him like a punch. For a split second, he thought his knees might give. Williams arrived a moment later, his face carved in stone. "I said those words in public," Williams growled. "The wager was foolish, yes, but not criminal. The board recognized the transfer. What's this really about?" But they weren't listening. Procedures had begun. Jessica ran in, documents clutched her chest. "There's a meeting upstairs. The Port Harcourt deal. If we miss that signature window, it's gone." Jonathan turned to her. "Go." "I'll stay." "No," she cut in. "You're signing it. I'll hold this." He sprinted to the elevator, folder in hand. The lift carried him like a bullet. At the top floor, he burst into the boardroom. Amanda was waiting. Gone was the janitor's uniform. She wore a blue dress now, freshly pressed. Next to her stood CFO Kalu, briefcase in hand. He handed a red-stamped document to the board. Court injunction, he said smoothly. All deals are frozen pending investigation. The room exploded in gasps. Jonathan stood frozen. You did this? He whispered. Amanda's eyes welled with tears. I didn't know they'd take it this far. You said that last time, he muttered. And the time before. Behind him, 2 financial crime officials entered. Mr. Adme, please come with us. He didn't fight. He didn't plead. He looked once at Jessica's empty chair, then let them cuff his wrists and walk him into silence. The interrogation room buzzed with fluorescent light. Cold metal table. 2 officers with practiced poker faces. Jonathan sat with his hands still, his mind turning quietly. He had survived worse. The door opened. Williams entered with Jessica. She laid out the proof. Amanda sneaking into the study, planting fake documents, slipping envelopes to Kalu at the back gate. Every frame time-stamped. Then the audio. Kalu's voice hissed from the recorder. Once this story hits the news, we buy out Williams. Half price. No one will trace it. Amanda's voice shook. He doesn't deserve this. Then don't grow a conscience now. Do you want her life back or not? Silence. Then the soft click of a deal being sealed. The officers looked at each other. One nodded slowly. This changes everything. Jonathan was cleared that evening. No press release. No cameras. Just Jessica waiting by the lobby with his coat. She didn't speak. She just handed it to him like she'd been holding his place in the world. Outside, Legos buzzed on unaware. Amanda didn't run. She sat on the courtyard bench of Williams' mansion, head bowed, hair unkempt, the same way she had first arrived. The guards flanked her up behind him. She slammed a thick folder on the table. Photos, security footage, audio from the mansion. It wasn't Jonathan. Jonathan approached, slow steps, shoulders heavy. I thought I could fix what I broke, she said. But I only made it worse. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. You never wanted forgiveness, he said quietly. You wanted restoration. But you didn't plant seeds. You planted pain. She cried again. Don't hand me over. Please. I'll disappear. Jonathan looked at her, not with anger, but with something heavier. You'll face what you caused. Not for revenge. For truth. He signaled the guards. But make sure she's treated fairly. As they led her away, Amanda looked back once. Not to beg, just to see the last man who ever believed in her. Later that night, Jonathan sat in the mansion's garden, watching the fountain glow. Williams joined him, handing over a glass. You could have buried her, he said. No one would blame you. I would, Jonathan replied. Silence hung between them. You know, Williams said softly, you've grown wiser than half my board. Jonathan chuckled. Life doesn't give scholarships. It gives scars. They clinked glasses. Above them, the sky cleared. The rain had passed, but its memory lingered. So did hers. The morning light arrived soft and slow, teasing Lagos awake as if it had forgiven itself for yesterday's mistakes. Jonathan descended the marble stair of the mansion with a quiet clarity. He carried the chessboard, not to play, but to remember. The wooden squares were smooth now, the edges worn by hands that had known both triumph and defeat. He reached the garden where the guests of the small celebration had gathered. Not for press, not for pomp, but for the people who had stuck by him when the world told him he was done. The fountains glimmered with early sun. White lilies swayed gently in the breeze. William stood near the fountain, his suit perfectly pressed, eyes brighter than gold. Jessica held his arm, her smile calm but electric. It was a scene of victory, yes, but also of survival. Jonathan placed the board down on a small table in the middle of it all. He cleared his throat, and for once didn't feel the swell of nerves he used to. He felt only the steady beat of something deeper, gratitude. He looked at Jessica first. She nodded. He looked at Williams. He nodded back. Today, he began, voice low but clear, is not just a confirmation of a deal. It's a confirmation of a truth many of us forgot, that every fall, every loss, every silent night under the bridge, it was not for nothing. He paused. The crowd stilled. Children sat cross-legged on the lawn. Staff members in crisp uniforms watched from the edges. Some wore ties they were allowed to loosen now, because today they weren't hiding behind walls. They were part of something alive. I once thought victory meant never losing. I was wrong, Jonathan said. Victory means getting up. It means facing your scars. It means sitting down with a board and playing the game when your heart tells you you've lost. It means looking at someone who broke you and realizing the only person you owe the checkmate to is yourself. A light wind picked up and spun a lily petal across the chessboard. He reached down and moved his king, just once, to join a knight. The move didn't change anything on the board. It changed something in him. Thank you to those who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you to you, Jessica, for walking into my silence and staying. Thank you to you, Williams, for reminding me that power means little without honor. He turned to face Williams and extended his hand. My partner, my friend, my brother. Let's build not just a company, but a legacy that cares. Williams gripped his hand, firm, without show. Let's. Then Jonathan faced Jessica. And you, he said softly, my compass when I was lost. She stepped forward and took his hand. And you, she said, are the man who turned revenge into hope. A hush. The boardroom doors opened and the guests moved forward. They sat. They watched. Some wiped tears. Some squeezed a partner's hand. Williams began once more. I want to raise a toast. He raised a glass of light champagne. To second chances, to people who survive, and to love that doesn't run when the world crushes you. They clinked. The sound rang out over the water, over the city lights. It felt like possibility. Later that day, they walked through the mansion grounds. Williams' driver parked the Bentley, but they left it parked. No rush, no exit. Jonathan walked beside Jessica. He still carried the chessboard under his arm. She paused by the fountain. Why do you carry it? She asked. He looked at the board as if seeing it for the first time. Because I want to remember I could lose everything and still play the move that mattered. She smiled. You already did. They stopped under a tree, the sun beginning to dip. He turned to her. I don't want this moment to end. She leaned against him. Neither do I. He kissed her gently, not theatrically, just sincere. And for once, the city didn't hum too loud. That night, Jonathan stood on the balcony overlooking Lagos Lagoon. The lights danced. The water reflected stars. He felt the weight of the chessboard in his hand. He closed his eyes. For years he'd been measuring life by losses, by shackles, by the silent humiliation of being invisible. But tonight he measured it by something else, connection. He thought of Amanda, a faded chapter now, walking away. He thought of corruption, greed, lies. He thought of the boardroom that tried to swallow him, the hidden files, the cameras in the corners. And he thought of the move that changed everything, the simple, calm decision to play when he didn't believe he could win. The wind picked up. He opened his eyes and felt the future. Morning arrived again, not soft now, but bold. They held their first board meeting with Jonathan at the head. The room was filled. No one whispered his past anymore. They accepted his presence, his role, his purpose. He looked at the screen, the numbers, the markets, the plans. But he looked harder at the people. Engineers, designers, staff. He saw them as pieces, not pawns, not chessmen, people. He smiled. Then he stood. Let's begin, he said, and the room sprang into life. In the quiet hours before dawn, when Lagos was still breathing dreams, Jonathan sometimes still sat on the bench under the bridge. Not to sleep, not to hide, but to remember. He would touch the rough wood of the bench. He would close his eyes and hear that morning when the crowd gasped after I said checkmate. He felt the old code on his skin, the smell of the street, the despair, and he thanked it, because sometimes the strongest kings rise from the simplest boards. When Jessica found him there, she didn't ask what the board meant. She simply handed him a coffee, 2 cups, as usual. He smiled not because he was rich, not because he had power. He smiled because he had purpose. And somewhere in the city, under the lights, another chessboard waited. Not for revenge, for redemption, and for the man who had finally learned how to win again.